So Jigna and Jennifer, thank you ladies so much for being my bright muse. And so you two ladies knew each other from work.
Yes.
And hashtag 2020, you were both laid off on the same day in April.
Correct.
And right now you have a podcast called Laid Off Life, which I think is a brilliant name. And so tell me, walk us through how you got from that day of being laid off to coming up with this podcast.
I wish I could I should look back at all the text messages to see what day it was, Jigna, that like we started that real conversation, but I don't know if I remember exactly the date, but it was
almost immediate, right?
Yeah, it was within a week. I think we had been texting each. Well, we commiserated together, and if we could have gone and hung out and had a margarita, we probably would have, but that didn't happen, right? Because we were all quarantined. So but Jigna was starting to send me cute pictures of her, like sitting out on the porch with like a chai tea, and she'd say hashtag laid off life. And so then I would send something back. I had an inflatable pool in my backyard, and I was like, I actually put an inner tube in my 4-foot by 8-foot inflatable pool and was laying in it, and took a picture and sent it to her with it. So it just kind of became like a little banter back and forth, trying to make the best of a bad situation.
The focus really is on, or at least initially it was on people who had lost their jobs and are laid off or furloughed, and just sharing our the sadness or our dreams or our hopes, just good and bad, right? And then we realize more and more people are finding it useful. So, for example, we had an episode around different office personality types, right? But you have these personality types at home too, and everyone can relate to it. You have a negative Nancy anywhere you go, or positive Phyllis, or eager Ernie, whoever it might be. So,
who's at the watering hole? Yeah,
exactly. So we're finding people are relating to it, whether they're laid off or not. So that's really nice and affirming. And I really appreciate it when we get feedback like that.
Have you guys, just going down this road, have you had some really interesting stories coming in from people? And tell me a little bit about your episodes.
So we had one of our guests was an HR individual, a recruiter, who actually gave us really tangible tips on what you should put inside your resume to get noticed. And it's sort of, kind of backwards back in the days. You remember when you knew so-and-so, or your dad knew this person, or your friend knew this person, and, let's make that connection. It's sort of all about that now, more so than ever. And it's scary because for the individual who is and sort of outgoing, it's easy for them, right? They're much more likely to go out there and network. For an individual who is an introvert, who is just as highly qualified as the extrovert, they may not be as comfortable, putting themselves out there, but the demand is that you put yourself out there. And how do you do it in a way that is going to be impactful to the recipient? So I really found, a recruiter, his name is Satish Vilanki. He had some amazing inputs, and I actually utilized it. I think Jennifer said she used it too.
Yes.
And I'll be honest with you, I got calls when I made those changes on the resume. I did a couple of cold, just submissions. I didn't know anybody from Fortune 500 companies, right? And whenever I tried to apply, I tried to ask, my network and say, hey, do you know anyone at this company? Can you make a connection? At least put in a good word. I didn't know anyone, but I took those recommendations, and it worked. So our hope is that it'll help others.
What do you guys feel is the temperature of attitude with those who engage? Is it hopeful, or does it vary? What are you feeling?
It's a mix, but I think overall it's a hopeful, and it's hopeful and positive are two different things, right? At least in my experience, it has been. In certain situations, people are positive about that situation, and others are pessimistic about it, to be honest. But overall, they are hopeful.
I think part of the process too, I think people need to remind themselves too. It is it's almost like there's the stages of death and dying, like you go through that grieving stage. I think people need to remember there is that same kind of, you're kind of in denial first, and then that kind of anger will hit. Because I remember when I got really angry finally. And it was, let's see, so we got May, so it was all May, June. It didn't hit really until that first week in July. It hit around my birthday, actually. And it may have been the culmination of like, it's my birthday and I don't have a job. And like, do I feel like there's an end in sight? Like, I was angry, like I was at people. And so I think that recognizing, okay, this was a normal grieving stage that I finally hit. Because I think you have to allow yourself to go through those stages so that you can get back to where you can be productive.
Well, I love what you're doing in this space, because you're allowing people to have these emotions and to experience this stuff. And I feel like, gosh, there's so much power in that. When you realize I'm not alone, it's not just me. What have been maybe your top 2-3 takeaways from this experience and this podcast?
Even when we get a job, that we're not going to stop. Like, we think there's so much to talk about, and this is going to take so much healing too for, the world even to get over, and how many jobs have been lost and how it will change the job market and change the type of jobs that are out there. This is going to be a bigger systemic problem for a while. And so how do we keep providing the perspectives to folks? And I think too, again, it's always been one for me. The last one I'd say is too, just because we've talked to people that come from all different walks of life, is that we are much more alike than we are different, even though we want to pretend we are so different. But, we are really a lot more alike than anything. So
if I can get some satisfaction of connecting people in the right way, it doesn't work all the time, but it's a good takeaway for me, or something that I've prided myself on. And I didn't realize I had that.
One last question that has really nothing to do with this, but Jigna. Okay, so I've heard debate on what we consider first gen. So there's first gen if you were born here. They're like, that's first gen. Or the other side of an argument also says, if you came here when you were a kid, like anywhere from baby to, maybe you weren't born here, but what do you think? I mean, do you consider yourself first gen?
So that's a great question. I actually was confused myself. Do I consider myself a first generation, or is it my son who was born here? And I looked online, I Googled it, and I got the same responses. It's both. Some say that it's either you're born here, or others say like you grew up here. Do I consider myself a first generation? In some ways I do, in other ways I don't. I struggled for a very long time with my identity. What am I? I had a really big moment, identity moment in 2000 specifically. 2010. 2000, I was 20 years old. I had gone back for the first time since I had come to America in '88. Gone back with my family. And we did a trip, and it was fine. In 2010, I went back. In India, I don't know if a lot of people know, but they have different entry fees. So if you want to go to the Taj Mahal, Indians pay a very low fee, like 10 rupees or 20 rupees, super cheap, right? It's like 70 rupees to the dollar right now, or 60 rupees to the dollar. So you can kind of gauge how cheap it is.
Sure. Right.
And then it's 500 rupees for foreigners. Like, look at what the big difference is. They made me pay 500 rupees. I had an identity crisis at that point, because up until then, I thought I was Indian, and I breathed Indian, and I was very proud to be an Indian. And then everywhere I went, they said, well, you're not Indian. Everyone in India, they didn't think I was an Indian, and some of it was jokingly, certain families and, people I hadn't seen forever. And they're like, they're not really family members at that point, because there's, I don't even know them. But you go and visit, and they're like, oh, you're an NRI, which means non-resident Indian, or you're a foreigner, you're American. And they say it jokingly, but it's very hurtful. Because here in America, I never felt like an American, 100%. So for the longest time, and I tear up when I talk about this, because it brings me right back. But for the longest time, I didn't know what my identity was. And I still struggle with that, because I don't, especially when in these political times, I don't know. There is a possibility as an immigrant, even though I'm a U.S. citizen, I could be asked to leave.
Mm.
And then what happens? So, my entire family's here. My mom's side of the family's here. My dad's side of the family's here. My child, everyone, my entire life is here. So it's, and if people say, oh no, it's never going to happen, but it has happened.
Yeah.
It's happened throughout time. There have been concentration camps of Chinese
or even
people who were citizens, or Italians.
Well,
you were saying your grandfather.
My dad. So
Your
my dad.
right.
So my dad's mother was an Italian immigrant, and but she married a U.S. citizen, and so he was an officer in the Army, sent off in World War II, and they put my dad, his mother, her sister, and his newborn brother in a concentration camp during World War II because she was full-blooded Italian. And they lived in her, like my dad says, it was like a little tiny shack. Like it had a little kitchen stove area and a little bed area where they all slept. And that was pretty much like it, the kitchen had this to keep them warm. And they were put there during part of the war. So
in the States, you're saying?
Yeah. It's things we
don't hear.
And so, yeah, it's,
wow.
That's crazy. Like to me, when I think about that, I'm like, and his dad was an officer in the Army, and he went off to World War II to fight, but they stuck his wife in a,
wow. And what happens in the political climate now does impact how I see myself.
Sure,
whether I'm a first generation or or whether my son is first generation, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if I'll ever know. I'll struggle with that for a long time. I feel like more so I'm not as welcome here as I used to. There's actually something that happened. There's an investigation here locally in the city we live in where there has been some letters that have been sent to Chinese and Indian individuals in the IT field that have said that they need to go back home. And if they don't, they'll be shot at sight. And it's happened here and it's happening in Houston. There's letters, people are just sending anonymous letters with these types of horrible things. And, that's a reality people don't really realize. And at that point, do I want to be a first generation American, or is this something I won't even have a right to even call myself that? You question that on a regular basis. But that's a reality we live in at this point in time. And hopefully my hope is it'll dissipate with more jobs, more opportunities. People are happier. The bellies are full. They might be less inclined to hate each other.
Right.
So I don't know. That's a great question. I just wish I had an answer for you.
Well, I think that's why it's a debate. Nobody really can pin that down, but I do feel like we're on the extreme of the pendulum right now.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's just optimism that keeps me surviving. Maybe it's not real, but I would like to think it's real, that we're in a pendulum right now, and eventually it's going to swing back. But I just, I want to say I know it's not my fault, but it's what we've all been given. So we have to do something with it. But I just want to say, I'm so sorry that is even a thought in your mind right now.
I fly my immigrant flag up high because it's about teaching, normalizing, right? It's about having people understand that, hey, you and I are from different places, but I'm no threat to you, and they won't know that unless I'm around them. And that's one of the reasons I kind of do that. And yeah, I'm a little scared at times, like, ooh, this is not a good situation for me to be in, but I have to for my people. So I would say, don't hide, don't do that, because it's not going to help.
Right. I love your voice and that you're doing that. And if there's any other way that I can continue to help, encourage that or get that out, let me know.
It saddens me that there, in a lot of ways, we've gone backwards, and it's sad. We'll see what happens. I don't want to talk politics at all, but it's the whole Black Lives thing is concerning, and it doesn't affect any of us. We're not Black, right? But it does. And like
Right.
you both were saying, it does, because unless you normalize, there will always be this problem. So, and, you know, the fact that you're bringing, you know, this out there, Suzanne, it's great that you're talking with these different muses, you know, from all walks of life. And when you and I were talking about that, you're like, I'm really interested in seeing, you know, hearing this person's story, even though you may not be exposed to it. And that's the thing. Maybe just go out there and just talk to one person in the entire year.
Yeah.
Just talk to one person you wouldn't otherwise.
Right.
See what happens.
Yeah, it's a game changer. And thank you. Yeah, it's exactly why I'm doing this. Because like you said, the majority of people are peaceful people.
Yeah.
And we basically all want the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's the you know, outliers who are yelling that make it really difficult, make us all fight. But if you just talk to someone, basically, you know, or screen to screen, you know, someone and hear their story, it messes with your heart in a good way.
Another thing I try to do, and I'm not sure if people would be wanting to do this, but this is my way of building tolerance with my son. He's half Indian, he's half white, and it's important for me to make sure he is a global citizen first and foremost, and understands his heritage, his culture, and where he's come from on both sides, not just my side. So what I try to do is really introduce him to different religions. I'm not religious at all, but it's very important for me to make sure he and I are both very tolerant of different religions. And I think that is one of the key issues right now, is that people don't understand religion, and then that's what kind of causes all these, like, well, your religion says, you know, you cause war, and, you know, just crazy things. And I want to take him to church, I want to take him to the temple, I want to take him to the mosque, and eventually I'll try to do that. I encourage everyone else to do that. It's hard. Sometimes we don't know anyone who is, say, Jewish, who can take, you know, to a temple or anything like that, but I bet you join a group, you're at least in one group on Facebook, and say, hey, I really want to do this. How can I bet you someone knows someone.
Whenever you want to go,
you know,
I'll let you know. Us. We will go with you.
Oh, okay, perfect.
If you want. And this period of time has definitely brought all of our shit to the surface. I'm kind of glad that those who feel like they never get to have a voice are really being heard now.
They are. And that's really good. It needs to happen. And I would say this is a storm before the calm. So the storm is definitely raging.
Yes, let's hope so. All right. Well, thank you, ladies.
Yes, thank you.
Y'all enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You too.
Till next time.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks.